Hi, Jonathan Roe, good to speak to you. Jonathan has a FS background and has recently joined the board of Amigo as chair of the board. So Jonathan, just to kick us off, do you want to tell us a bit about the boards that you've been on to date?
Yeah, my long-term background is a qualified accountant and into the city floating things. And I floated many things for my own work, including Norwich Union and Orange. And the last big thing I did was Rosneft, the Russian state national oil company. When the crash came, my bank, just the bank, shut its, was bought back on it, and they shut my business. I then did expert witness work on insider dealing and market abuse. And I then was invited to join the board of Vanquis Bank, the Provident financial subsidiary, which does higher APR credit cards. And a year later, in 2013, I joined the AA's insurance broking board. I became chairman of the bank in early 2016 and stepped off both boards about a year ago. I then did some work with some startups, not in financial services as it happens, where I quickly found the kind of moral compass or lack of moral compass was kind of not for me outside of my risk profile or personal risk profile. And I was approached to join the Amigo board in about May time, joined the board in August and became its chairman in early October.
Brilliant. And Jonathan, joining during lockdown, how has that been? Have you been able to meet them in person yet, or has it all happened digitally?
Well, all the interviews were done kind of with the magic of Zoom, and we're all quite used to that.
Yeah.
You can always be a bit surprised. You think that somebody is going to be a person of stature, and you find out they're only 5'6" when you meet them in person. But I have now met them all.
Oh,
met them all.
I've had exactly the same thing. I interviewed for a board and joined the board and only met them in September. So that process happened through lockdown as well, and it is a funny process. But I was surprised by how well we could get to know each other on Zoom. I was encouraged by it, really.
I think that's right. You have a kind of familiarity continuum. I think the video thing helps because you get positive feedback rather than somebody grimacing down a phone line. So I think it's worked well. I think we've kind of come through it. The more difficult thing I'm finding is getting to know the staff.
Yeah.
Amigo has kind of half opened its office and then half shut it again. And that's important because how the staff feedback to you and interact with you is really important. It's amazing what you'll learn, but that kind of feedback loop is denied in the current, or mostly denied in the current circumstance. So I've not met, whilst I met all of the Amigo Exco, I've not necessarily met all of the people who report into Exco, and that's kind of missing from this.
I wonder whether there'll be increased emphasis on that over the next 6-12 months, like how do boards manage that? Because I totally agree. I think it's a really important part of ascertaining the truth of what's going on in the organisation. You need those insights. And actually part of section 172 is making sure that we understand the employee group as a stakeholder group. And I guess if it's just research reports and surveys, it's not as good an insight as having the odd chat and the odd coffee. So I'm sure that will change over the coming months, or I hope it will.
I hope it will as well, because it's important. The thing about interacting up and down the business is that if somebody tells you something is an issue, you log it. Once you've heard it for the 4th time, it's true. If you see what I mean. Typically, you'll find that people don't feel they've got a voice. You need to recognise that if I go to meet somebody junior as the chairman, they're kind of on their best behaviour. So you will well, they may not be, of course. You will be filtered against as well.
Yeah.
But you need to have the ability to make them feel comfortable that telling you things actually A, might change things, and B, they're not going to get into some kind of trouble or issue with it. Because what we found at the AA was that you have this business about tone from the top, and so I can have a conversation with somebody on Exco and they'll go, yeah, that's brilliant, let's do that, that's much better for the customer or whatever. But it quite often hits a kind of permafrost layer going down the organization to team leaders, on the people on the phones, because they want to mark their own team well, so the team gets decent remuneration and they get decent remuneration. So they may not be kind of on message once it's gone down 2 or 3 layers of communication. So that's something you need to watch out for.
Yes, and it's definitely one of the challenges of this particular season. I guess it's quite hard for a board member that hasn't met employees before to suddenly have a Zoom call and to make people feel relaxed. That is quite challenging. So, you know, it's much easier meeting people and having a coffee and having a bit of chit chat as well.
Yep.
So, Jonathan, you touched on you've moved from an executive role on a board to a non-executive role. Can you share a bit of what that transition's been like?
Well, I had quite a decent break between finishing what one might regard as the day job, and starting as a non-exec. But the non-exec role is kind of similar to being an advisor. Which is what my banking career was about. I was advising PLC boards, quite big companies, as to what the right thing to do vis-a-vis the market and M&A and all that kind of bit of space. But I always describe the role as cautious cheerleading. You're there as a director to make the company the best it can be. But you're going, have you thought of, what about this?
Yeah.
So you're there as a kind of check and balance. But you need to have good open flows of communication. You need to have a chief executive who doesn't mind having his thought process challenged. A bad chief executive is one who keeps all the information close into himself, and then does his best to keep you away from the business and keep stuff secret. So you only have what he chooses to filter into you, rather than kind of what the broad spectrum or a broader spectrum of what might masquerade as the truth. And your only defense to that is to actually insist on being involved with the business, insist on not us meeting Exco, but people below Exco, to find out what they really think and feel about it. Because a lot of the kind of accidents that we've seen in financial services have all been as a result of overpowering chief executives who've got away with it for too long. You should welcome challenge. You should welcome a different view. It may not be. You may not have all the facts, so you may at the margin have a different view of what outcome should be. But unless you've actually had somebody bowl you the question, and it's the innocent questions that kind of floor most people. It's not the intricate question. It's the broad intricate questions. So always ask open questions, but you need to have done that with sufficient armor to be able to penetrate. It's no good asking a simple open question and everybody goes, duh, we discussed that last week, or duh, don't you know? It's got to have enough kind of nuanced substance to it to make people think, rather than allow a simple dismissal of it. So my boards, I always want to get the best out of people and encourage them to have a voice. And even if they're not in their comfort zone of what they really know about, it's that kind of left field question of from somebody who's not an expert, that can really make you sit up and think. And if you have a board where you kind of shut down conversations, you're missing out. I mean, it goes straight into the whole world of diversity, of course, because it's that groupthink, which leads you into trouble, as opposed to left field think, different think, which might not yield some interesting avenues.
So Jonathan, you've worked in financial services and you've been on FS boards as a non-exec. What would your message be for people that are considering that role?
The key message is that the regulation has tightened and improved significantly in the last 5 or 6 years. There's a kind of, certainly in retail financial services, a kind of increasingly laser focus on customer outcomes and good customer outcomes, and the businesses which have been entirely focused on their own profit line have suffered significant regulatory interference, and many have gone to the wall. So it's really standing in the shoes of the customer in the retail space and looking for practices which are old practices which need to be challenged and need to be corrected. So there's that. My overarching kind of comment to you would be to lift up your eyes and be curious. Do not let, I encourage all the staff to, do not let anybody tell you we've always done it that way as being the accepted or unacceptable answer. It's not. Challenge it. Why do we do it? Why do we do it that way? What safeguards have we got in? And you can have the most perfect policy for lending or whatever at board level, and then it somehow gets subverted as it goes down and executed. So you need to be kind of aware and conscious about what can happen. But particularly, and the FCA have really focused on incentives and bonuses and that kind of thing. And the incentive has to be skewed towards good customer outcomes as opposed to bulking up the profits.
You mentioned earlier about the morality of some of the startups that you've interacted with. And I just wondered sort of what would be your message for people when they're thinking about a board role as they look to consider sort of the morality of that organisation? How do you get a sense for that? And what would be your sort of top tips?
You need to be comfortable that the people you're going to sit around the board with are kindred spirits, open-minded, want to make the best of it and have sufficient kind of knowledge to be able to make a difference. That doesn't mean to say that every bank board or insurance board has to be full of bankers and insurers, because that leads to kind of groupthink. But it needs to have a collection of people who are thoughtful, curious. As I said, lift up your eyes, be curious, challenge why we do this way. If you don't think you can get on with the chief executive and the finance director, that's probably a good reason not to bother. Because if they come over as closed and know-alls, that's not a good basis for having an open discussion with them in due course. Can I just finish with one closing thing? We all look into diversity, but it is diversity of thought, not of thought and background, rather than race or gender. Would be my view on it. My other view is that if you can't enjoy being a non-executive director of a business, you shouldn't do it. Just stop. It won't always be pleasurable, but you should enjoy it. It's a great privilege, and it's not always great fun, but it is great fun. So you enjoy.
Thank you, Jonathan. That's brilliant and a great point to end on. I hope that anyone watching this has found it encouraging to hear some of Jonathan's thoughts on his experience as a non-exec, and that you might be interested in doing non-exec roles yourself. We've got the link after this. If you want to go to Dynamic Boards, we showcase paid non-executive director roles for free, so you can check them out. Thank you, Jonathan. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye.